One moment. We should be live.
Thank you, Mr. Voigt, and thank you to everyone who is here with us today, both watching live on YouTube and, of course, all the members, delegates, and senators who are joining us here today. My name is Jeff Waldstreicher. I am the Senate Chair of the Joint Committee on Federal Relations. Delegate Chi is the House Chair, and I'll turn it over to her in a minute. I wanted to begin by saying what our work in front of us today is and what it is not. As many of you know, the Joint Committee is the primary committee that is engaged in the relations with our federal representatives and everything that's happening at the federal level. But in light of the changeover in federal administration and the circumstances that presents to our state, the leadership of the General Assembly, both of the presiding officers, created a separate committee that allows them to narrowly focus on those issues. Yesterday, that committee met regarding the shutdown that has begun today. And so if folks at home are wondering why we aren't discussing the obvious, it's because we have a separate committee that's laser focused on those issues and protecting Marylanders and federal workers under difficult circumstances. And so I just wanted to put that out there. Let me kind of lay out what we are doing here today, and then I'll turn it over to Delegate Chi. Today, we're going to be talking about interstate compacts, which is another important policy that this joint committee deals with. The Council of State Governments, also known as CSG, is going to present today. They are a nonpartisan organization that was founded in 1933. CSG advocates for state interests through policy analysis, convenes state leaders through conferences and task forces, and facilitates interstate cooperation through its National Center for Interstate Compacts. We are joined today by the director of the center, Dan Lodgson, and Deputy Program Director Carl Sims. This center provides policy resources and technical assistance related to compacts and also manages an interstate compact database. The reason we requested this briefing is because there are certain compacts, that CSG has expertise in that Maryland is not a part of. The EMS compact, the physician assistant compact, the dietitian licensure compact, and the interstate massage compact. But some of our peer states have recently joined those compacts. And so we've asked CSG to present here today on that. Just one other note before we begin. I think it's probably best if we wait until after the presentation for questions, if that's okay with the members. And at the end of the CSG presentation, we'll have a brief presentation from Senator Kagan on an unrelated matter that I think is really important and I wanted to bring to the attention of the Joint Committee. With that, I'll turn it over to my wonderful co-chair, Delegate Lily Chi.
Thank you, Senator and Co-Chair Waldstreicher. Good afternoon, everyone. Thanks for taking the time from your busy middle of the week to join us. I want to take a moment to quickly recognize those members who are present. I do want to recognize our guest speaker later, Senator Cheryl Kagan, and of course, Senator Karen Lewis Young, and Senator Foden has also joined us. I also want to recognize the House members who are here today, Delegate Karen Toles and my colleague on ECM, Economic Matters Committee, Delegate Andrea Johns, and Delegate Morgan. Thank you very much for joining us. Today is a difficult day, as we all know, with the federal shutdown. Regardless of our party lines, our communities will be affected. This is a great time to remind ourselves that oftentimes state legislatures are leading the way of bipartisan work. And it's thanks no small part to the leadership of organizations like CSG that bring us together across geographies and across party lines to provide the instruments and the tools and resources we need to do our job. So I know I looked at the PowerPoint presentation. It's like a 60 slides, it's a chock full of good information. So I want to make sure we have enough time to get right to it. Please save your questions to the end We assure you, you will have enough time to ask questions. So thank you very much, Carl and Dan, for joining us. Let's roll.
You. I'll share my screen. Should I even? Oh, there you go. Oh, well, yep. Carl's a genius. Okay, yes, thank you for having us today, and like to always talk about interstate compacts. I am Dan Laux. I'm the director of the National Center for Interstate Compacts here at the Council of State Governments. We are a membership organization for states. We're nonpartisan, nonprofit. We were founded in 1933 at the University of Chicago. We ran out of space there in the mid 60s. Kentucky gave the council the best deal, so that's why someone with my accent is talking with you today. We worked on interstate compacts throughout the history of the organization, but we founded in 2004 the Compact Center as we saw things begin to ramp up around a number of compacts, including the beginning of some licensure compacts, but also an electric line siting compact and a compact for prescription drugs. So let's go on to the next couple of slides. So interstate compacts, the best way to think about these, I believe, is that these are contracts between and among the states. There's mutuality of requirements there. They have to be legislatively enacted and signed into law by the governor. They can also be repealed that way. These are incredibly powerful instruments. And I think that's something that we always like to drive home with states. States, don't get to change the legislation once it gets to them. That's why we take so much care in vetting them before they're finalized. We do weeks of stakeholder review. We have a large project team around these things, including state officials, to vet them. Because once they get to the legislature, we can provide some clarifying language here and there, but generally the provisions cannot be changed in any way because, again, every state has to adopt the terms of the compacts. And the great thing that we believe about interstate compacts, the most important thing, is they do preserve state sovereignty. States certainly can't act outside their borders on issues, but with the compact, they can coordinate with other states to do so. So it empowers the states to deal with bilateral issues, regional issues, or national interest issues. And again, it gives the states an opportunity to put their agenda forward and to put their thoughts forward. Congress, with the federal law, they can't account for all the vagaries that a state has to deal with when it approaches an issue, and interstate compacts give the states the ability to do that. Let's go on to the next slide. And again, these are collaborative, as it says, consistent enforceability and durability. Whenever we sit down with someone that wants to potentially pursue an interstate compact, the thing that we always look for first in our discussions with them is, does this need to be enforceable? And if it needs to be enforceable, then the best thing to pursue is an interstate compact because it's a contract and it is enforceable. We don't always recommend an interstate compact when we're meeting with groups if we think it can be handled through an MOU or some sort of other, informal agreement among the states. That usually works best bilaterally, then we would suggest that. We're not out there trying to sell interstate compacts. And if an issue doesn't need enforceability around it, it typically isn't a good candidate for a compact. But if it does need enforceability, the compact is by far the best measure to pursue to address that issue among the states. So. All right, and we've got our database online now at our website that you can look at. There's over 275 interstate compacts. Each state belongs to between 20 and 80. We used to think this number was 25, but when we were updating the database a couple of years ago, it's like states have on average done 42 interstate compacts, and you're up to over 2,200 total enactments. So these are instruments that states are familiar with, but at times we've discovered that I don't think the states understand how many they're already in or what they do. And so, we always encourage, that, compact commissions communicate with the states if there's a compact commission or the folks in state government that represent their state in the compact to get with the legislature and explain what you're doing, because that's going to raise more awareness around the issue that you're supposed to be addressing, and it gives us the legislature especially confidence that the issue is being addressed and that the time and/or resources that they're putting into that compact is worth it. And obviously, they can't know that if you're not communicating effectively with them. the vast majority of compacts out there that are operating with the commission submit regular reports to the legislature and the governor. All the compacts that we work with, it's a requirement that they issue an annual report. All right, so I'm not an attorney, but I've spent a lot of time around them, and this is always an interesting part of this. So as you can see, this is the what is authorization to pursue compacts. It's our attorney explained it to me. I always found this again fascinating that no state shall, without the consent of Congress, enter into any agreement or compact with another state. Over the years, the Supreme Court has decided that any doesn't mean all. So like I would read it. So what they've concluded is that if a compact doesn't touch some sort of federal authority or alter the federal balance of power, and I'll refer to these occupational licensure compacts, federal government has absolutely no role in regulating occupations in the states, then it doesn't need congressional consent. And we've heard over the years from organizations or groups that have approached us like, well, we're going to get congressional consent as a safety measure. It doesn't work like that. If it doesn't need congressional consent, you can't backdoor into it in the hopes that maybe one day it'll protect us. That it wouldn't be recognized by a court, according to our attorneys. Okay, so there are a number of compacts that have federal involvement. So consent of Congress is one of those. Financial support. There are a number of compacts, especially around justice issues, that the Department of Justice and the federal government support. Technical expertise and assistance. You see a lot of that and the participation on compact commissions with some of these environmental compacts. One of our attorneys is the general counsel for the Columbia River Gorge Commission. A federal agency has a presence on that commission and helps to advise them around technical issues. So this is something that happens frequently, especially with the compact that deals with some sort of public land or any sort of environmental issue. And so the two most recent examples of federal assistance is in 2020, the National Defense Authorization Act directed the Department of Defense to enter into a cooperative agreement with CSG to develop these licensure compacts. So it just ended yesterday after 5 years. We developed 10 interstate compacts out of that agreement and set them up. They're all but 2 of them are out to the states right now for consideration. Athletic trainers and estheticians will go out in January for consideration by the states. And then the Health Resources and Services Administration, they've been supporting compacts for probably, I think, over a decade. Most notably right there, psychology and social work recently, but in the past, nursing and the Interstate Medical Licensure Compact was created as part of a HRSA grant. All right, so occupational licensure compact. So this is what the vast majority of our work is in right now. So what they mostly do, what they exclusively do, is facilitate multi-state practice. All modern compacts have a compact commission to help coordinate activities around the compact. But an interstate commission for a licensure compact, this is not some sort of super regulatory board. It can't dictate policy to a state. It can't say, well, 45%, 45 of the states that are in this, have this policy. We're going to dictate that all states have that. That is outside its authority, and that's clearly spelled out in the compact that it is prohibited from doing things like that are outside the plain language of the compact. It also can't take unilateral action against the practitioner. That is left to the state where they're issued their primary license that gets them into the compact. Sometimes that's referred to as a home state. Other time it's just their state of primary licensure. These things are built in a way to facilitate multi-state practice, but they have components in them to preserve the ability of the states to enforce safety standards. As a friend of ours likes to say that was frequently involved with the EMS compact at the beginning. One of the main reasons you license someone is so you can take it away from them. And the health and safety component. If I think we're up to over 400 enactments for occupational licensure compacts. I think if they didn't preserve health and safety or enhance the state's ability to enforce their standards, I don't think you'd see states adopting these so readily. And then the biggest thing is when for all of them, EMS is a little quirky in this way, but for all the current licensure compacts that deal with healthcare professions, the practice is where the patient's at. So if the patient's in my state, then I control that practice. So your practice act doesn't travel with you. Carl explained the EMS compact deviates from that for good reasons, but preserving state authority, preserving the ability to protect the public, and again, what it does is facilitate multi-state practice. So the way that we develop these is we typically a group will approach us, or with the DoD agreement, we had an RFP out for groups that wanted to pursue it. One of the reasons people come to us is the process that we use, but also the fact that we can bring the state governments in. We would never pursue a compact for anyone without including state boards in this instance. We are not interested in writing this in a back room and taking it out to the states. That would certainly hurt our reputation. And when you're asking states to pass legislation that they can't change, your reputation means everything. These compacts, again, they're just there to facilitate multi-state practice, so they do establish uniform requirements across the states. The compacts go where the uniformity's at. You don't have to have complete and total uniformity. You don't have to have all 50 states that do the exact same thing. For the DoD compacts, that number was in the low 30s. But what you can't use a compact to do, what we would never be a part of using a compact to do, is creating it in order to drive states to a certain licensure requirements or a certain pathway that they wanted that other states pursued, or to try to bring some sort of uniformity to the states. That uniformity already has to exist in large part. Certainly you will see, especially if you've got 40 to 45 states doing a certain thing, counseling with its requirement that you have to have 60 hours of graduate work in your degree. There were some states out there with only 48 hours, and you saw those states change in order to meet the compact requirement. But that's a handful of states. We're comfortable with something like that. But we're not comfortable with is driving 25, 30 states into doing something a certain way that they haven't made that decision on their own. So as mentioned earlier, states join a compact by enacting legislation, having it signed by the governor, or at least not vetoed by the governor. And it takes effect. The compact commission can be convened once the requisite number of states have joined it. So we used to set that number at 10. Now we set it at 7. If it's arbitrary, you could set it at 25 or 35. They used to set compacts that they wanted to be national in scope at 35, but what we found is that number takes too long to hit. The Interstate Compact for the Placement of Children, it deals with kids in foster care. Its new version has been out, I think, since 2008. It's 35 before it can start working. It's yet to hit that number yet. So we like to set it at 7, get the commission up and working, and move on. If this was a different subject matter, we might set it a little higher, but we found that 7 works well. All right, and then so for a model legislation for the compact, so it lays out what a state must do to as a participating member. So a lot of that is around the data system and sharing that information and its disciplinary practices. What a practitioner must do to voluntarily use the compact. That's a point that we're so steeped in these, and especially for me, I oftentimes forget to put forward that these are voluntary. No one has to use them. If a practitioner, even if they're licensed in 2 compact member states, they don't have to use the compact. They can still keep those separate licenses. And then it lays out a governance structure for the compact. And again, that compact commission can only take action on the provisions of the compact. Again, these are powerful instruments. Interstate compacts are very powerful instruments, but they're hemmed in, they're contained by the plain language of the compact. So we'll get a lot of questions sometimes about rulemaking provisions, and yes, there's powerful rulemaking provisions, but the rulemaking has to adhere to the terms of the compact. And so we've started putting that language in explicitly, hoping that it will head off some questions. All right, and then again, so we're going to talk about policy advantages here. You do have that bidirectional authorization, so it's like, we're going to take your practitioners and you're going to take our practitioners. There's a lot of trust there. What we found is that, there are some states that think, well, we do it better than every other state. And it's just like you do it very well, but you don't do it so well that others can't be in that neighborhood. All do it well, and you're going to have to accept that. And there's a lot of trust there because you are trusting that these other states are going to license with the same due diligence as you do. But in our experience, we've yet to find a state that just sort of and a board associated with the profession that wasn't diligent and about their work. The great thing about compacts is they can also be adaptable, and that gets back to the rulemaking process. There are certainly compliance standards. So again, states get to enforce their standards with compacts. It relies on uniformity, so you're not pushing together states that have disparate requirements. You're pushing states together that build on that uniformity. If there's no uniformity in regulation, then there's no ability to have a compact. And then the marketability, this can be very helpful around the edges to pull folks into these healthcare professions. When we were working, beginning with occupational therapy and speech pathology and audiology, a lot of them, those two professions pull from the same sort of student group. So this was something that made them more marketable and made them more attractive to students who were looking to pursue a career. All right, and then the process advantages is, again, you'll have that centralized application process. There's expediency to the process because you're not having to check, and do the background on the requirements that your licensure requirements have in the state. That primary document verification that you do. We always kind of push back on states when they say, well, we can license someone in 24 hours. It's just like, and that's terrific. I wish more states did that, but that doesn't change the fact that this practitioner's been out there for 6 months running down information. So the fact that you make it easy on them once they get there is fantastic, but that's not the whole story around what I have to do to get licensed. So there is an expediency ability to expedite this that practitioners are appreciative of, and that the boards ultimately don't really have an issue with, again, because everything's tied to the uniformity and the compact and those standards. The maintenance requirements. So, there are things, and we've seen this military spouses, they'll have multiple licenses, and those multiple licenses have multiple requirements for renewal, and they'll have to keep that on spreadsheets just to keep track of those things. And that's another good thing about these compacts is typically continuing education. You only have to do that in your state of primary licensure or your home state. We often run into state boards that are very concerned about this, but there's only been a handful of instances where they haven't gotten comfortable with it and decided to join the compact. And then the data sharing. This is something that also we have to do a lot of explaining around. I hope one of the benefits of the compact is the data sharing, the sharing of disciplinary information. Now, that doesn't mean that everybody gets the disciplinary file, but you have to communicate, instances around disciplinary action and what practitioners could potentially be under investigation, because that's part of the compact is sharing that disciplinary information. We're not going to facilitate, they're not going to facilitate someone's ability to engage in illegal practice in multiple states. And as far as goals and outcomes here, so greater distribution of practitioners. It also allows new practitioners we've seen, especially important for a profession that you had a practitioner that was unable to find work that could be meaningful full-time in, Oregon, but what they work in Washington and Oregon, and because they were able to jump back and forth across those state lines so easily, they were able to put together a full-time employment. So that distribution of practitioners is something that's very attractive both to the practitioners and the states. Greater government efficiency, again, limits the work on the boards and allows them to direct when continuity of care is important, especially in telehealth, especially in mental health care professions. And then the telehealth opportunities we'll hear from time to time from membership associations in states about you're just increasing our competition. And what we've seen is that it's a different effect. It's more of a supply side effect. The more practitioners that are available, the more people that are going to take advantage of those services. And then all these compacts have provisions to support military families, or they're built in such a way that the fact that military families have a change of station every 2 or 3 years is accommodated for in the compact provisions. And then I've mentioned a number of times about the greater public safety net. If states didn't feel comfortable that they could deal with bad actors through the compact, or the compact effectively helped them deal with that, then I don't think you'd see the rate of passage that you see. All right. Carl, I'm still going. I'm sorry, I lost track. All right, and then so as far as status of occupational licensure compacts, again, there's a number of them out there. I think we're up to 21 now, which just a few years ago that number was in the high single digits. 48 states and 3 territories and DC have adopted at least one compact. We've seen DC tick that up recently. And again, as I mentioned earlier, there's over 400 separate pieces of licensure compact legislation that's been enacted in the states. And there's a chart that we like to show that sort of gives you a visualization of that. Physicians, nursing, psychology, or social work. So social work's at 28. That one's gone up like a rocket. It got 21 states its first year out. Carl, am I remembering that correctly? And that really and then counseling's up to 39 already. The compacts that deal with mental health, behavioral health are passing at a much greater clip than the other ones. And then there's a heat map that we created with Data Wrapper for you to see. All right, and then Maryland compact history. So Maryland's a member of 54 compacts, so Chesapeake Bay Compact, Interstate Insurance Product Regulation Compact, Washington Metro Safety Commission, and then one of the Virginia-Maryland Boundary Agreement Compact. So we always like to see those Boundary Agreement Compacts. You still see those, actually. Here's the licensure compacts that Maryland's a part of, past social work. I know a number of compacts are looking at that. We just had a meeting with a group on the school psychology compact. There's a group there that's interested in pursuing that. So there'll be a number of compacts that come there. The groups we're working with are planning on filing there next year. And there's the ones that are available. I mentioned school psychology. All right. And then the common licensure compact concepts.
And Dan, I think I'll take it over.
Okay.
Yeah. All right,
Thanks,
great.
Carl.
Yeah. So before we get into the 4 licensure compacts of focus, we first wanted to just visit some of those common policy concepts with compacts, some of which Dan has mentioned kind of earlier in the presentation, but just to visit those newly or revisit some of those concepts broadly before getting into those 4 here. So as Dan talked about with state sovereignty, that interstate compacts are there to help preserve state sovereignty, and they do that, one, in fact, that compact law becomes state law whenever a state joins a compact, and the voluntary nature of joining a compact in the first place, and how narrowly confined they are to what the compact allows for that law to do. So an example of licensure compacts, compact member states, for example, retain their authority for discipline. They're using their own laws and regulations, for example, to take a look at any kind of adverse actions that they want to take if that offense were to occur in their state, or if information was reported from another compact member state, they're still using their own laws and regulations to determine if they want to take away a compact privilege or practice or that underlying license that they have granted based on that own state's laws. That compact commission, again, is that government agency that's created by the compact, but it's comprised of the compact member states through their selected delegates. So typically that's the licensing board administrator or a board member who would serve in that capacity. And what their duty really is just one, stand up the compact once it's reached that threshold of states. And some of their duties, you see here on the final bullet point here, include that rulemaking provision, establishing the data system, which is critical to make the compact function, And then also there's a fee structure as well for the commission to pay for its duties, such as the data system, making sure that's up and running and in use by states here. So again, the Compact Commission, they can go outside of what's allowed by the compact themselves, including through their rulemaking and any kind of policies that come forth. The commission, again, it represents the states themselves, being that they are the only voting delegates that are comprised in that commission. Rulemaking, again, it's a very core and essential part of compacts to keep them adaptable. And in particular, I think important with compacts because as you have states joining into a compact through legislation, if there were to be any desire to change that legislation, then each state would have to also amend its legislation to reflect that change to preserve that uniformity. So rulemaking is helpful and again, narrowly confined to what's authorized in the compact to allow that compact member states to be adaptable to and be more detailed through that narrow, confined ability to kind of further the processes and policies for the compact. There is a very protracted rulemaking process that's set out in the compact legislation and then further refined by either bylaws and rules themselves that allows for public comment, several layers of commission reviews using a committee structure. And then there's some also safeguards in place, including the ability for state legislators to collectively reject a rule if it meets a certain threshold. So some examples here of what's in rulemaking and what's kind of not in the scope of rulemaking. And really the best examples are for those compact commissions that have already issued some rules to just take a look at those and kind of see examples of these. There's a fair amount of consistency in the type of rules that they have issued, but that can provide you a more tangible example. But in general, some things that you might expect for compact commission to have as far as rules, data system reporting fields, what is their process for rulemaking, issuing a compact fee for those that may be using the compact. But again, things that they can't touch upon, scope of practice, any other pathways for licensure, or any fee that the states themselves may want to charge for someone's participation in a compact. Fiscal impact. So this is a question that we get often. So first, licensure compacts provide the authority for the member states to charge a fee for those practitioners who are using the compact. So where a state might otherwise be getting that licensure fee, if someone is going through the compact instead because of its facilitated way and more expedited way for that practitioner to be able to provide services, the state would still be able to collect a fee. And largely it's up to the state to determine what that fee might be. So some might charge a similar amount as a license, some might charge a lesser amount, but up to the state themselves and how they would want to address that, particularly for these privileged to practice compacts. State assessment. So this is in all of the licensure compacts. It's provision in there by where the compact member states could assess themselves to help pay for the compact's operations. It's very rarely used. There's only 2 licensure compacts out there right now that have a state assessment. That would be the psychology compact and the nurse licensure compact. Both of those are capped at $6,000 per year per state and SIPACT on a kind of sliding scale based on usage within that state. And the reason why that they're rarely used is because also the compact commissions can generate revenue from those practitioners who are using the compact to help pay for the commission's expenses. Again, things like the data system, what makes the compact function and be able to provide for that and enhancements that would need to be involved to continue the use of that by both states and those using the compact in practice. Okay, now getting on to our compacts and profile here, first starting with the EMS compact. So a few kind of summary things to point out here. It was first formed in 2014 and it's up to 25 member states, with one being added in 2025. It's a privilege to practice model compact, meaning that other states are recognizing a license from an EMS, someone with an EMS license from a compact member state and are granting this privilege to practice based on this uniformity of standards that are set out in the compact. So that privilege is that authorization for that practitioner to be able to provide a service in a particular state. Someone going through a privilege to practice model like the EMS compact, they would seek and purchase a privilege to practice in each member state that they want to provide services in. There are different models, and we'll go into an example later on of a different model, but a lot of these employ that privilege to practice model, which allows for that kind of tailoring for that practitioner to where they would actually need those state practice authorizations. The compact is active, so it's reached that threshold of member states needed for that compact commission to get stood up and for the compact to begin its operations. So it is issuing compact privileges. Here's a map of those compact member states. And you can see here with Maryland, kind of surrounded here with Pennsylvania, West Virginia, and Virginia, also Delaware, being member states. Here are some key.
Carl, just sorry to interrupt.
Yeah.
Can you just go back to that slide? So
Sure.
the blue is the not members. The gray is the members.
Oh, so my apologies. I should have
There's
clarified
no
that.
key. It
Yeah.
doesn't.
Blue would be those who are member states.
The bright blue. So Maryland is not a member state.
That's correct.
Thank you. Okay, that wasn't clear. Thank you. Sorry to interrupt.
No, thank you for stopping me for me to make that clarification. So looking at the uniform criteria that exists here, and this is not an exhaustive list here, but provides you just kind of a look at what those core requirements are for the state, that they have to require the national exam that's used, I believe, by every state for initial licensure, but that's kind of that uniformity that's being reflected through the compact, but ensuring that consistency by those joining to the compact. Also requiring a criminal background check for those getting licensed through that compact member state before they're accessing the compact. And then for the individual, so if their state meets the requirements, the individual must meet specific requirements on top of that as well, including having unrestricted license and practicing under the supervision of a medical director. Again, there's other provisions within the compact, but just to provide you some examples and kind of some of the highlights that would exist for the EMS compact. Here's some specific notes regarding that might be unique to EMS. And so what Dan had touched upon with the scope of practice. So just due to the nature of EMS services, it's written to the EMS compact that the provider's home state's scope of practice would apply. However, there's provisions that could otherwise modify that the remote state, being where the services are being carried out, could be modified if that remote state should choose to do so. The reason why this is unique for EMS is just due to the nature of how they operate. If someone is operating during an emergency and going across state lines, picking up a patient and then maybe bringing them across back to the other state line to a hospital, having that differences while having emergency saving care there, to have that complicated by scope of practice could be cumbersome and potentially dangerous. So having that clarity about scope of practice really helps this profession. But otherwise, there is some clarification that EMS has through their rules as far as just advising their providers to always follow direction of the agency that they are affiliated with while practicing, which would usually be that remote state. So again, that remote state being where that practitioner is providing services through the compact that's not their home state. I do want to mention also, Donnie Woodyard is the executive director of the EMS compact, so have his contact information up here as well for any particular questions that he might be able to assist with. Okay, so for the physician assistant compact, so that was formed in 2022 and it's up to 19 member states, having added 6 this year. It is also a privilege to practice model. So again, anyone using the compact would be seeking a privilege to practice in each member state that they would want to provide services in based on the recognition of their license from the state that they are using as their qualifying state. So that state that's a member of the compact, and that license being recognized by those other compact member states. The compact is active, so it's reached its threshold of number of states that it needs for the compact commission to start making the compact operational, but it's not there yet as far as issuing privileges to practice. The commission inaugurally convened last year and is in process of having the supporting rules as well as a data system in place before those privileges can start to be purchased by PAs wanting to participate. Here is a map for the PA compact. So that in the kind of orange color would be those that have joined the compact. Those in the blue currently filed legislation, Michigan, Massachusetts, and New Jersey still have their legislative sessions going on and will continue through the end of the year. So there is the possibility of more compact member states being added this year. But also on the map on the PA Compact website, pacompact.org, you'll be able to hover over the gray states to kind of see a history of previous introductions in case you're curious. Here's some more uniform criteria. So again, just kind of a summary, but not an exhaustive list of those requirements for both states to participate, as well as individuals who are licensed within that state. So for states having a criminal background check in place and using a nationally recognized exam as a condition for licensure is one of the couple of key requirements here. For those PAs wishing to use the compact, having NCCPA certification, which is the only certification nationally recognized being used by PAs, and then having graduated from an accredited PA program, also a very common uniform requirement that already exists throughout states. There's also the requirement of not having a felony or a misdemeanor as part of this compact as well. Some specific notes regarding the PA compact. So again, it's currently in the process of becoming operational. There's a few unique things to PA regarding collaboration and supervision agreements. So states can differ whether they require PAs to enter into a collaboration or supervision agreement with a physician. And so because those might differ from state to state, it's a common question of how this would relate to the compact. And the answer would be that the compact doesn't change that nature. So anyone using the compact to provide services in another state, they would have to abide by the laws and regulations of the state that they're providing services in, or otherwise where the patient's located. And that would include collaboration or supervision agreements. So even if they're state of qualifying licensure, the license that they're using to access the compact doesn't require collaboration or supervision agreements or one or the other. It would all depend on where they're providing services of whether they would have to abide by that or not. So again, it's not changing the nature that PAs are already operating under through the current system. PAs will have to still go through and get the proper prescribing authority based on a state's laws and process. And then there is, for some states, a transition from the title of physician assistant to physician associates. It's built into the compact that should there be a title change by a state, that wouldn't affect their participation in the compact, and that any title that's synonymous with physician assistant, including associates, would be read the same as for the purposes of the compact. For the dietitian licensure compact here, it's formed in 2023 with 15 member states, 3 this year. Again, it's a privilege to practice compact, and like PA, it is active. The Compact Commission has inaugurally convened and is working to become operational right now, but they're not quite there yet in being able to issue compact privileges. Here is the map for that compact. So those in the dark blue here are currently compact member states. No current pending legislation, but you will be able to see by visiting the website some of the past history. I believe in that kind of darker gray you see here would kind of infer that past history that exists of previous introductions. And then some of the uniform criteria here for state requirements, licensing dietitians, having a criminal background check in place for the individual. I'll go to the next slide here, but providing a small list here. There is 2 pathways for an individual to qualify. Either they can be a registered dietitian nutritionist, have that certification in place, or go through another pathway of having equivalent requirements that would include education and supervised experience. So provides another pathway for someone who might not have that certification, but could achieve it in another way. So providing some flexibility for providers to be able to still access the compact. And then finishing up here with the Interstate Massage Therapy Compact that was formed in 2023. They have 5 member states, 3 being added this year. They, unlike the other 3 that I mentioned, they're a multi-state model. So what that means is that instead of being granted a privilege to practice in each compact member state that someone would want to through the privilege model, the multi-state, once you're granted a multi-state license, that provides you the authorization to practice in any compact member state. So not having to go through and individually purchase and receive a privilege in each of those states, but you get one license that provides you access to all. Why one compact is a model, certain model, and not others is part of that development process and talking with stakeholders, including licensing boards and the professionals themselves about what model makes most sense for them. So that's part of that intentional facilitated process that we have before that model is chosen. And also note that this compact is not yet active. It requires 7 states for it to for that to be met, and they're at 5 right now. Here is the map for that state. Or that compact, you'll see the darker kind of shade of blue or purple here being current compact member states, and then those in kind of the teal having legislation pending. Here are the key requirements for massage therapy compact. See here, including examination requirements, educational requirements, background check for the state, and then for the individual, a certain number of hours of experience. And then having passed a national exam as part of what they must meet, on top of making sure that their state meets the requirements as well. Then we'll just finish up here by having our contact information listed, as well as our website, so that database that we had referenced, where you can see in more detail the different participation across states in different compacts, including lecture compacts, we have up there in case you're curious to learn more. So I think with that, I believe there's time for questions, so I'll be glad to answer anything that you all might have questions about.
Let me defer here to Delegate Chi, and Delegate Chi, if any of the House members have questions, I'll allow you to lead that discussion, and we'll go next.
Okay, thank you very much for a super thorough and a very dense presentation. I think overall we need to learn about this information about and of course our committee's role in working with you on that. I see there are several hands, so I will wait for my own question, and I will defer to Delegate Miracle Norse, who just joined us. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you for the presentation. I'm sure you might be aware of this, but I have introduced 2 pieces of legislation related to interstate compact. So I have a lot of questions, but I will only start with one. And 2 of those questions, 2 of the bills that I introduced related to the teacher compact and the school psychologist compact that was referenced earlier, that I'm in talks to reintroduce. So my question to you is something you had mentioned in your presentation about some of the pushback being that some states feel like they're doing well, so why have this compact? I can tell you from experience that the response to we're doing well with not really is not flying, to be frank. And I want to get your feedback on what other states have been able to argue successfully to get some of these compact bills that being introduced in other states, because Maryland certainly prides themselves on education. As you can tell, the 2 bills I introduced reference the school system. So I'd love to get your feedback on what other states have done to overcome the challenges in passing the education-related compacts.
Carl, you want me to?
Yeah, if you want to take it, and then
on
I'll
this one?
add some notes.
I think it varies from state to state in some respects. Some states are very interested in helping out military families, military spouses in the teaching profession. You see a great deal of attrition when a military spouse is a licensed teacher in one state and there's a change of station and they go to another state. It's in a number of states, and states try to make it as easy as possible, but it's a very cumbersome process, and what you see a lot of times is they just give up. A recent teacher shortage is something that certainly for teaching drives home the fact that the compact can it's a tool that states can use certainly to bring them in. And then I think if the school systems are really involved, I know there were a couple states, I think Washington was one of them, where a couple of local school districts were very active in promoting the compact with the legislature, and that seemed to make a difference. With school psychology, I mentioned the passage rate for social work, that counseling and psychology had been passed at a pretty good clip in the last couple of years. I think anything to do with mental health is something that states are going to respond to. States really are looking to, especially in schools, provide that sort of care to students. So, I know you said you have a lot of questions. You can reach out to us, and we'll be happy to talk with you, and we can connect you with the groups that we're working with about those compacts. But it varies somewhat from state to state, but those are the things that we see, especially with teaching in school site.
And I would just add also maybe more broadly to some of the advantages of the compact from a process standpoint. So as Dan talked about, some states may say, hey, we can grant a license within 48 hours, but there's still amount of time and burden placed on the practitioner even before that application gets to the board of figuring out, well, how do I qualify? Who do I contact? Let me gather up all that information that I then need to submit to the board. Whereas compacts help provide that uniformity of qualification and process across their member states. And then also a unique advantage of compacts is that they're helping out those practitioners that are currently within a state, being able to access across state lines and provide services depending on kind of the nature of their work as well.
Thank you. Let me go to Delegate Tolles.
Thank you so much, Madam Chair. Good afternoon. Thank you for the presentation. If you can, I'm a member of the judiciary, so I had a couple questions. Well, one question really as it relates to the massage therapist. If you can go back to that particular slide. And while you pull that up, I have done some work around human trafficking in the past, some legislation on a local level when I was on a local level. And so I wanted to know, in terms of your compact licensing as it relates to massage therapists, do you ever, when not ever, do you consider, human trafficking training, information, what to look for, those type of conversations and regulations as it relates to massage therapy, their criteria? I didn't see, I know you went by really fast, but I didn't see anything as it relates to some type of human trafficking training. Because that's where in the past, I'm not sure if you're familiar with that whole human trafficking and massage therapists, but massage therapy facilities have been known to have a high level of human trafficking happen in massage parlors, rather. So I wanted to know if there is any conversation or criteria around regulating, or at least providing rules and regulations that all states can follow. They're multi-state regulation.
There's not. We leave that to the home states. That's all a part of protecting state sovereignty. One thing that we did do with this compact that's different from the newer ones that we write, because public policy in every state has moved away from this in recent years, is there's provisions in there that disqualify people from getting a multi-state license if they've had any sort of criminal conviction. And again, you've seen public policy shift away from that a great deal in recent years, and that regardless of the state. And so we've moved away from that with the compacts. I know nursing and medicine both have provisions around you can't participate in a compact if you've ever had a felony. I think maybe even Carl, nursing might be a misdemeanor as well. I can't recall that. We have moved away from that because what we heard from the states was that we're moving away from that. The legislature is moving away from that. We don't really want those provisions in there, so we don't have those. But we did put them in for massage therapy. So trying to address who can access the compact was the way to address it. I talked about how the compact can't dictate policy to the states, and that would be one way that it would. And so we wouldn't put that type of provision in there. That's something where the state that licensed that individual, really has to take up, those sorts of requirements and for the practitioners.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I would like to talk offline with them. I do have some follow-up. I definitely think it's something worth digging further into as it relates to human trafficking and massage parlors. It's a unique license, unlike teaching or other licenses. So if I can. Thank you.
Thank you for raising that issue. It's very thoughtful of you. And I would like to ask my own question as I was listening to your presentations, especially relates to these last four compacts. I wonder if the CSG, you in particular, your center, has some thoughts about how a committee like ours can be can work with you, can best partner with you in facilitating Maryland's participation in those compacts. The fact that you highlighted these four because Maryland currently is not part of that, there's probably some merit in arguing we should be part of them, and all of that. And I just want to know how we can better work with you besides the mechanics of the advantages of those compacts, right? What role should we play in facilitating legislation? Because I could sense a little bit of a, maybe frustration or desire on the part of Delegate Miracle North about how we can actually pass legislation to facilitate that process. So any thoughts and advice in that regard?
I think, we provide technical assistance to states. And so I think what we run into a lot of time is unfamiliarity. So education is a big part of what we do. So I think that's where we can be the most help. This is especially true around rulemaking. We hear a lot of concerns around rulemaking, and there are ways that we can explain that to ease those concerns. Because again, we talk about preserving state sovereignty, and then there's provisions in the compact that say, a compact commission rule has a force and effect of law in the member state. And, I would expect the legislator to say, hey, what is this about? But we can go through rules that other commissions have drafted, have on their books, and explain, have our attorneys explain if necessary, how the rules of the compact can't get outside at all the provisions of the compact. So I think education is certainly the number one thing that we can do. It's a process, but that's something that we're willing to engage on, because I think the more we can get the legislators comfortable with these mechanisms, and we can do that through examples. We'll hear all the time. It's like invariably during the legislative sessions, we'll run into someone who says, "I just can't believe our state would ever enact something like this." And it's like, well, you're in 40 of them, and they just don't know that. So I think explaining those things and educating members is something that we do very effectively, and we can do. Carl's probably certainly got some ideas on that as well.
Yeah, I'd say, along with that education piece of it, that we're commonly also there during legislative session and committee hearings on introduced bills to provide information about the compacts, answer questions during that format as well. But having those individual conversations, certainly for interested sponsors or just those curious to know about the compact, I'm always glad to meet and answer those questions, provide information about what's currently out there for that compact, or provide context as it exists for the profession or other states, and how they're similarly looking at these compacts as well.
Well, I would certainly be more cognizant about checking out your resource going forward in terms of the trends, because I'm wondering, if your center kind of tracks the different states' participation in these compacts, and or even go as far as making recommendations and say, hey, similar states like yours with heavy professional concentration in those areas have joined, right? Maybe this is something you can consider instead of being reactive, waiting for some legislator to come forward and say, hey, my constituent complained to me about this, and therefore we should do that, right? So I just think as a resource center, maybe we could be more mindful about leveraging what you have to provide if you are already providing that kind of service. Okay, any other questions? If not, I will turn it back to, I was going to say I would turn back to my co-chair, Senator Wolstriker, to facilitate Senator Shader Kagan's presentation / discussion about the 911 letter that we should have all received in the. Oh, you have a question, right?
I do.
Okay,
actually.
all right, good. Madam Vice Chair of Triple E. Go ahead with your question.
Thank you so much, Chair T. I just had a quick question either for Carl or Dan. When it goes to EMS or others, other professions that have certification, and some states might have different standards than others, how does that work to make sure that our folks are being held to the same standards that those who live in Maryland are if they move in from another state or work from another state.
Yeah, I'd say that the compact legislation itself provides what that uniformity should exist across 4 states for their conditions of licensure that would really, one, reflect the uniformity that already exists across the states, but two, provide that kind of consistency so other states can know and be sure that if this state is also participating, anyone that they license has at least met these requirements and as determined and specified further by the compact. And then there's also the kind of more private certification that can exist on top of licensure that's also can be built into the compact, as you saw through, for example, the dietitian's compact, how an individual might have to have that in place as well. But again, reflecting kind of how the profession's already moved there and what states might also require on top of that. So that's all through the terms of the compact legislation, which will provide that look for other states so they know anyone participating will have to meet these standards.
And the enforcement is done by whom?
So enforcement of those standards would be through the Compact Commission.
Okay,
So typically
you.
they'll establish a compliance committee for that function.
Appreciate that. That's what I assumed. Just want to check. Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. I don't see any other hands. So we'll defer it back to my co-chair, Stryker.
Well, thank you, Chair Chi, and thank you to our friends at CSG. We really appreciate this presentation. It was an informative one, and it sounds like we're going to have some follow-ups offline. And that's, really the great work of this committee, both what we do in as we're meeting together and what we do individually to follow up on everything we've learned today. So we want to be respectful of your time. We're going to pivot to something unrelated to interstate compact. So if you need to disconnect, please feel free to do so. But Dan, Carl, thank you. And please thank everyone who supports you at CSG on behalf of the committee.
Thank you. Thanks, Ben, for all your help.
Now I want to turn back to Senator Kagan. As we described earlier, interstate compacts are very much part of what our joint committee does, but it's not exclusively what our joint committee does. Senator Kagan has been the leader on the Senate side related to 911 policy, and Senator Kagan, I'm sure there are members of the House who have shown incredible leadership about this as well. She had a quick matter that she wanted to address to the committee, and of course I agreed to have her do so. Senator Kagan, I will turn it over to you.
Thank you so much, Chair Waldstreicher, Chair Chi, colleagues. I'm going to be really brief. As Chair Waldstreicher indicated, we've been working on 911 for many, many years. 3 people have died in my district when 911 has failed. And there are some things that we have done in the state that have put Maryland at the forefront of shifting to next-gen 911. But there are some things that we need Congress to act on. So I think I have permission to share screen. I think you all have gotten a copy of this. Colleagues, can you see this letter? I'm just going to describe it super quickly. Yes, Chair Chi, I see you nodding. This is a letter that we are sending from the 911 Specialist Recruitment and Retention Work Group. I am not going to read it. It asks for 2 things. We want, as Maryland has already done, we want Congress to officially reclassify our 911 specialists. Some people think of them as operators or dispatchers or call takers. In Maryland law, they are 911 specialists, and they are the courageous women and men who save lives and property every day through their work under the headset. There is mental health trauma. There is just so much training, certification, and all that. So currently at the federal level, they are seen as clerical workers. By reclassifying them as professionals, as the first responders that they are, we can get them better benefits, including retirement benefits. So I am trying to figure out how to move this screen down. Hopefully, nope. Back to you. Doosh. Let me try that one more time. Nope, I lost it. Maybe someone at DLS who's got it can pull the letter up, because I have Chair Waldstreicher on my screen now.
Oh, well, I still.
Do you still see it?
No, well, now it's gone. I think DLS is trying to pull it up. While we're doing that, what I imagine people are curious about is the full work group in support? And does that include members of both the majority and minority parties?
Thank you for the question, Senator Waldstreicher. Yes, and yes. You are seeing what is the letter that is going to go to Congress today. We are not requesting that this committee send the identical letter. We think that it would make sense for you all to do a different letter with your masthead, with the name of this committee, and signed by you all as co-chairs. But it asks for two things, and one is the Senate, U.S. Senate, has already passed this and reclassified the 911 specialist. I'm going to stop sharing and let DLS do it. Thank you. Encourage the passage of the bill. The Senate has already done it, consensus unanimously, and we need the U.S. Congress to do it. So we are hoping that our members will do that. The second thing is there is a bipartisan, bicameral Next Gen 911 caucus. Many members of Congress from the Maryland delegation over the years, starting with Dutch Ruppersberger and moving forward, are already members. We want to encourage, while we're sending a letter, we thought we would do two for the price of one and encourage them to share that. Again, it's bipartisan, nonpartisan. It costs no money. It just shows I care about 911. This letter you will see is signed by me as the chair of the commission, by Senator Carrozza, Delegate Teresa Riley, Delegate Jamila Woods, and I'm happy to take any questions. I don't want to take a lot of your time. And again, I'm grateful for your consideration.
Any questions for Senator Kagan? All right, so I think the request is that the Joint Committee support this letter, perhaps with a letter of our own, to the extent that this issue is nonpartisan, bicameral, and that your work group has already kind of indicated that fact. Unless we have any objection, we'll kind of go offline and draft something up to support the 911 work group in this work. Okay.
Thank you all. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Senator Kagan. I'll conclude where we began for members of the public who are joining us via YouTube. And we're expecting today a discussion about the shutdown. As I indicated earlier, the presiding officers have created a separate body of both the majority and minority parties in both the Senate and the House to deal specifically with those aspects of federal relations. That committee met yesterday, and for those who missed it. And so if you're here for that discussion, that's why it didn't occur today. But of course, our hearts go out to all those who have been furloughed, and we pray and hope that the government reopens shortly. Thank you to all the members who joined us here today. Thank you again to CSG, and a special thank you to the incredible work of the Department of Legislative Services, whose work behind the scenes really made today possible, and just always doing incredible nonpartisan work. With that, I'll say thank you once more and turn it last time over to my co-chair, Delegate Shi.
Thank you, Senator Waldstreicher. I just want to say I'm glad you mentioned the other federal committee. It's a little confusing, even to members perhaps, but I'm glad you clarified. The way I understand it is this oversight committee tends to deal with more urgent matters that require immediate action and consensus between the two chambers and party leaders. And this committee, on the other hand, deals with more ongoing issues such as social compact and so forth, right? Interstate compact. So I think we are a standing committee that we have our work cut out to do. And today is an example of that. So we encourage you to continue to be involved. And also at the same time, give us ideas of the kind of briefing you would like to learn about. I found today's briefing very informative. It'll be a bit dense, but you have the slides and you also have Senator Kagan's letter in your inbox.